Hi, I'm Andy Clarke and welcome back to Stuff and Nonsense. On this channel, I investigate work from designers outside the web, learn from them and apply those lessons to product and website design. This is important because to keep improving product and website designs, we've got to look for design inspiration in different places. I want to discuss a designer that I learned about recently. His name's Otto Storch, and I found his work while flicking through a new addition to my design library. I just loved how the designer playfully combined images and typography to create a design that's full of energy and movement. So I snapped a picture to remind myself to take another look. When I saw that striking design, I hadn't heard of the designer who'd made it, Brooklyn-born Otto Storch. Although he was an award-winning graphic designer, Storch and his work have been largely overlooked, unlike many of his contemporaries. Storch amassed a vast body of work, and it's an incredible shame that his work isn't more widely known, especially online. There's not even a Wikipedia page devoted to him, and no one's published a book about him or his work. I'm impressed by Storch's design work and his prolific work ethic. He took what he'd learnt from designers who'd gone before him, combined it with his own approach, and made distinctive and engaging work. I hope I can do that too. Discovering him has made me want to make more people aware of the man and his work. Otto Storch was born in 1913. In the 1930s, he began his career in the forgotten art of pre-digital photographic retouching. During the 1950s, Storch took classes at New York's New School for Social Research, and he studied under Alexei Brodovich, who encouraged him to get a job working on a magazine. I'm going to talk about Alexei Brodovich in a future video. Success didn't happen overnight, and it took 7 years of freelancing before the publisher McCall and its Better Living magazine hired Storch as an assistant art director in New York. McCall published several titles, including their Blue Book, Red Book, and most famously, Popular Mechanics, with those incredible cover illustrations. By the way, this does not look like the world's safest plane. Storch moved on to McCall's magazine, where he built on what he'd learned from Brodovich and his experience designing advertising materials, album covers, book covers, and magazines. Storch wasn't afraid to make opinionated choices, and this assertiveness makes much of his work distinctive. I just love this quote. He said, "Good art direction does not come from an uncertain person. I'm capable of intense feeling and was willing to lose a popularity contest with departmental editors when necessary. The visual responsibility of the magazine was mine." Storch carried on Alexei Brodovich's legacy of imaginative magazine layouts. He understood the double-page spread is a creative canvas, and he made it a feature of his work, sometimes by allowing elements to flow between pages. Other times, Storch made the gutter an integral part of his design. Storch often used large headlines and images to unify his spreads. For on the cob or off, a corn cob drips butter on both pages. For another feature, the 40 Winks reducing plan, he allowed his subject to stretch out, resting on a bed of running text. This copy sinks under the weight of the sleeping model. The large black and white graphic in Why Teenage Marriages Are Falling Apart isn't confined to just one page. Instead, it occupies 3 out of 4 columns on the spread, and it dominates the design. The gravity of a headline in the middle of those concentric circles pulls the eye towards it. In his design for Girls Are Silly, Aren't Boys Awful?, Storch placed 2 children forehead to forehead with a gutter between them. He emphasized this tension by aligning his text in opposite directions. Storch made combining images and text look effortless, but his results came from years of experience and practice. For Make Fashions Fresh as Paint, Storch's tightly packed text fits perfectly into an artist's paintbox compartment. The models in this spread for McCall's patterns also fit inside the box. Storch's playful and unexpected use of scale adds yet another dimension to this design. Storch believed that a strong idea, copy, images, and typography are integral to editorial design. Despite its apparent differences from print, I think the same is true of web design. Storch understood typography could do much more than present readable content, and he had a knack for turning type into graphical objects. For McCall's extract of a book called The First to Know, Storch mirrored the recto and verso pages and set his text into a circle that reflected the circular telephone dial. You know, it can be so much fun to study a designer's work in another medium and then apply what we learn to the web. This design by Otto Storch was the first to get my attention. I admired the structural simplicity of the black and red facing pages, but you first notice how Storch crafted the shape of his text to flow from the hands and feet of the two models. This creates organic shapes which playfully fill the page with energy, and it just feels fun. I think we desperately need more fun in web design. I knew I could make something interesting inspired by this design. So I start every design with a grid. There are countless grid options, and I decide which one to use based on how I want a design to feel. Some grids feel ordered and structured, while others allow for more energetic compositions. I chose a compound grid of 4 and 5 columns because of the rhythmic pattern it creates. I plan to talk about compound grids in a future video. A wireframe illustrates the structure, which will be helpful not only while designing, but also when developing a design like this with HTML and CSS. It shows how I'm mirroring the layout across the center of the screen, just like Storch did with his double-page spread designs. I justify the text differently and add colored backgrounds left and right to emphasize the mirroring, placing the little Volkswagen logo in the center to connect the two sides. Using pre-formatted text and CSS shapes lets me add text which flows along the contours of the two cars. Now I can guess what you're thinking. How can a design like this be responsive? Well, it's simpler than it looks. I can rotate the cars to fill the width instead of the height, with the text positioned underneath on medium screens or in portrait orientations. The two colored panels can then stack vertically. The spirit of the design stays the same. It's just the implementation that changes. Then, for tiny screens, rather than shrink the cars to fit, which would lose their visual impact, I'd make them poke in from the sides. In Be a Stroke of Beauty, I love how playful the scattered brushes make this Otto Storch spread feel. Yet despite the seemingly random appearance, the design still has a structure. There's an obvious column grid for laying out text, with images that break out of their columns to cut into the copy. Again, a wireframe illustrates the structure, with Storch's paintbrushes replaced with my Volkswagen Beetles, arranged at angles and cutting into the copy. Flowing text around shapes turns a static-looking layout into a dynamic composition. CSS shapes allow text to wrap around irregular shapes, and they can be used with clip paths and alpha channels. Although browsers have supported CSS shapes for years, designers rarely use them. I honestly don't know why, but they're simple to implement and they can help bring energy and movement to a design in ways that no other property can. Flowing text around shapes works equally well on smaller screens, and making this layout responsive just needed me to stack those two text columns vertically. What about really small screens? Well, users on mobile needn't miss out, because flowing text around shapes can also work for them. You needn't abandon a design concept just because there's less space. The lesson to take away is that maintaining a solid connection across platforms is one of the things that matters most. On the cob or off is a classic Otto Storch design, where an image spreads the entire width of the layout. You know, I've often ranted about those ubiquitous full-width banner images that I see everywhere on the web, but this image works because the massive corn cob unifies the columns of text below it, just like a newspaper headline would. The white space around the cutout image and text unifies the layout in ways that a rectangular image with hard edges wouldn't. This layout is perfect for a blog entry, news, article or product page about the Volkswagen Beetle. Now, I don't see text split into columns often on the web, but it makes good sense for plenty of reasons. First, CSS lets us specify how wide a column should be to ensure that the text has a measure that's comfortable to read. That way, when a screen's wider, a column can automatically create additional columns of text, giving an article an editorial feel. This is accentuated by the stand first paragraph, which spans the text columns, whether there are 1, 2, 3 or more. This layout responds to medium-sized screens and wouldn't need any extra code to implement the design. For the smallest screens, instead of making the banner image smaller to fit the width, which would change its visual weight and affect the hierarchy, I would add a horizontal scroll to the banner image. This example, we propose to dispose, is a beautiful example of how modular grids can add rhythm and structure to a composition. Otto Storch used 4 columns and rows on each page in his spread, sometimes placing an image into a module, and other times combining modules into spatial zones for headlines and body copy. I don't see modular grids used nearly enough online, which is really surprising, as the box model is one of the foundation principles of CSS. On a wide screen, that grid makes 4 rows of 8 columns each. Combining 3 modules horizontally creates space for a headline, and 8 modules vertically makes a spatial zone that's perfect for a solid block of body copy. I especially love the repetition that's possible from using modular grids, and I plan to talk about them in a future video. In this Storch-inspired layout, the modular grid prompted a design which is very different from how it might have looked had I started with a column grid. Modular grids are especially handy for creating layouts which respond to screen size. CSS Grid has properties which allow content to auto-flow, changing the layout according to how many modules can fit into the width. For a medium-sized screen, I can also specify the positions of individual modules, placing the headline and body copy precisely where I want them. And for the smallest screens, I might place specific images into a horizontal scrolling panel that acts as a banner-style graphic. Finally, this design was inspired by Otto Storch's spread for Why Teenage Marriages Are Falling Apart. In this design, Storch placed a huge spiral graphic on the left page, allowing it to spread across the gutter and onto the right. This limited the space for the body copy, which is then confined to a narrow column. The 4+5 compound grid that I used earlier is perfect for defining the proportions of a large graphic and narrow text column. There's even an opportunity to wrap text around the circular Volkswagen logo using CSS shapes, which adds an extra level of detail to the design. This layout is easily simplified for medium-sized screens by placing the body copy underneath. Instead of allowing the text to fill the screen width, I kept its width narrow and pushed it up to start neatly between the Volkswagen's wheels. Otto Storch and his designs can teach us so much about how we can improve the work that we do on the web today. Just like Alexei Brodovich, Storch mastered his canvas, and rather than be limited by it, he used his pages to present content in ways that made it not just understandable, but also more appealing. And this appeal matters because it connects people with a brand, a product, or a story. And that matters to any business, whatever the medium. Otto Storch might be a new addition to my list of inspiring designers, but his designs are already influencing mine. So if you like this video, please like it, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when the next one's available. And if there's a designer you think I should know or make a video about, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.